But they say it learns, and I'm not sure if it learns in total or learns for you. But it's kind of a fun experience learning about the car, the technology, and the charging and all the gadgets in there. Kind of interesting. It's interesting for old people to learn these things. That's why
Are you finding the ergonomics working with the screen easy, comfortable to work with, or is that taking you some time?
it's taking me some time, but it is like a pad. I mean, to me, it doesn't look attractive at all. I think what you described with the Mini sounds very attractive and more intuitive. The circle, the round screen, right? It has a round screen.
Probably, yeah, it's a larger radius now than it was on the earlier. I mean, I remember the Mini has that little circle. It's in the middle of the dashboard between the two
Hmm.
occupants.
Hmm.
It's a style thing. It's kind of cute. Um, but it's gotten larger and larger and larger. And now that they're putting all of the information, they're taking almost all. There used to be those kind of navigation switches where you've got the little flip switches above and below in
Hmm.
the Mini. They've taken a lot of those away, and I think there's down to just a few, and then everything now is on the screen. And even in my electric Mini, the touchpad was only in the middle third of that screen, and it's
Hmm.
still a circle. But the newer Minis, this is the one that Dean has. It's a touchpad. The entire circular screen is touchpad,
Let me see.
and so he's gotten used to it. But he has admitted that there are things that he has to do, and this is what I have to do sometimes too. Is if I'm going to do something like change a channel or find a song on my media, I have to start with doing the first part of that, drive a bit, do the second part of it, drive a bit, and then do the third part of it, drive a bit. Because if you sit there and do all three of those together, your attention has gotten dangerously off the road.
A question: Is it easy to index your hand, like touch something, so you can, with your thumb touch the screen, or do you have to touch the screen like this?
Well, there's a my girlfriend is pissed off because she thinks that the touch screen itself just not is not sensitive enough. You have to there's a little target for you to touch, and you have
Uh-huh.
to touch it 3 or 4 times before it actually activates it.
Oh, okay.
That is something that, and I think that there's some, and in the wintertime, it's not a gloves thing. It's not
Yeah.
gloves. So, um, but I mean, I would have to say that the comfort, it's if you get the car warmed up, it's comfortable. You don't need gloves in the wintertime. Um, this is the 2022
Yeah.
Mini. I don't know that I think that I would assume that since Mini has gone kind of all in on the screen, I would have to hope at least that they would be smart enough to get a good quality touchscreen technology in there.
Well, let me repeat my question because I,
Well,
I
here, I know if
as
there's
as an old guy, I have a difficulty touching with a regular iPad or my phone, touching the button because
Mhm.
it has to be touched accurately. So when you're in a car and you got a screen and you're moving, how do you
Yes,
how do you hold your how can you hold your screen? Like I'm holding the top of my laptop and I'm touching just below the camera. Is
yeah.
that is that is that what you have to do, or are the buttons big enough so you can just reach out and touch?
Warren, you have to wait till the next stoplight.
Well,
I
even
think
then, even if I'm stopped, yeah,
Yeah.
the screen is really giant, and so if you have to touch one place on the screen, I my hand is going like this. I'm an old guy. How do you,
Yeah.
is there a place to rest your hand? The question is.
On the Mini, I would put it on the circle. The circle is kind of extended out. It's like a picture frame.
Okay.
I would put my thumb on that picture frame and then use my fingers to
Okay.
touch.
Okay. So you
Now,
do.
when I'm in my car and my girlfriend's driving and I'm trying to order some food with my phone, I have to do the same thing because the Mini is a little bit more, you can feel the road on a Mini, okay? And so it's going down a
Yeah.
residential street, I'm jumping around like this.
Sure.
So in order for me to get the order in, I've got to have my phone in my hand, kind of like this, where I'm using the hand to touch the
Yeah.
phone.
You're
So,
indexing your hand on your phone so you
yeah.
can do that. Yeah, I
So I
understand.
have my hands actually kind of touching each other because I'm holding the phone and I've got my hand against my, yeah.
I find it easier to work the one, especially in the car, to use my ring finger than my pointing finger or my middle finger.
Oh,
And someone told me that that was because these three fingertips get worn down. Your fingerprint ridges aren't as sharply defined on your thumb and your first two fingers.
Hmm.
And
Huh.
so this finger gives it a little more contrast somehow to detect the touch. It sounds absolutely silly, and it works.
whatever works.
I don't know if that's actually it, or because I'm doing it that way, I'm paying more attention to it, or
Depends on how often you've been to the police station.
Uh, there are voice controls for on the Tesla. Does the Mini is the Mini using voice controls?
Um, well, you have Apple CarPlay, which can be controlled by your voice, which just for the entertainment. But I don't recall that I used anything in the Mini
Yeah.
for voice control.
Yeah, because the pad is so complicated, I've reverted to the voice control. And that's better,
Do you have
certainly.
to say, "Hey, Tesla" or something like that? Or
No, you hit a button for there's a microphone button and you could just give it voice
oh,
control.
you have a foot thumb something.
Yeah. Well, it's right under your thumb anyway on the
I kind of like to drive, and even in my gas Mini, this is off topic, but I like to drive with the cruise control a lot.
yeah.
I've got a 5 up, 5 down grip. I can just off on the steering wheel. I can go 5 miles per hour faster, 5 miles per hour slower.
Hmm.
And even with the electric car, a 5 mile per hour slower, if you hit that 3 times, the regen kicks in and it really kicks you really slow down. It's kind of fun to drive. I don't You wouldn't think of this, but driving in traffic with stop and go traffic with an
Yeah.
electric car is actually kind of fun because you can get immediate starts and stops and you don't have to shift. I still have a stick on my Mini. You're not doing a lot of shifting.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and I know you probably have some kind of a automatic distance. What do they call that?
Yeah,
Uh,
it sets the distance from the car
cruise,
ahead of you. Yeah.
an automatic cruise control, adjustable cruise control.
Mhm.
The thing is about in traffic, I don't know how you feel about this. If you don't set that close enough, people will cut in a lot.
No, I don't have that during traffic. Well, on both my Subaru and the Tesla, that doesn't happen. It's actually a little too close. I don't know how to adjust it, but it's close enough. It's far enough to be able to divert if you had to go around somebody. So it seems to be what 10 o'clock, Rosa? Okay.
I'm going to post a video in the chat it's a Rose Engineering with Rosie. I don't know if you've ever seen her before, but there's a company called New Scale
Uh-huh.
in Copenhagen that's working on a small modular thorium reactor.
Woo, woo.
Yes.
A molten salt reactor that's a small modular molten salt reactor for that's going to be produced in a factory and can be trucked to a location. And if you need more, you just put more of them next to each other, kind of thing. So yeah, that's the thing. So I'm going to put that in the chat here.
Great, thanks. So I gotta go, guys. Sorry, gonna miss out. I'll look for the recording. Appreciate it. Take care.
And David, I'm going to get you. My talk is going to be about media. Is that next week?
No, I think Tom is next week, unless you want to do it next week.
I thought Tom was this week.
H. Tom is
H. Tom is this week.
Tom
Tom
Walsh.
Walsh is next week.
Okay, well, is that the 19th? I can't do it on the 19th. I'm going to Des Moines.
I'll look at my calendar.
I would have told you that because I've known that for quite some time. Okay, I just posted the Copenhagen thing. I'll post their website as well. It's called New Scale.
All right, this feels almost illegal to know, but our windows were so old and just desperately.
Morning, Carol.
Good morning.
We're not talking about something?
Oh, actually, let me post it again because you came in. I don't think you're going to see this because you came in later. But I'm just going to put the.
That
We've been talking about cars,
cars.
automobile vehicles,
Okay.
and modern user interfaces.
Okay.
Carol, I just wanted to share with you. I read an article lately where I believe it's the Japanese or the Chinese have just figured out how to do what you've been talking about of transmitting energy from collectors in space back to Earth. And I thought of you right away when I saw that.
Well, yes, I actually did a
Yeah,
presentation.
I remember that. Yeah,
They were planning this.
yeah.
Also,
Yeah,
did a presentation a hell of a long time back on
yeah.
how to do it. Uh, can you give me a pointer to that? Like in chat?
I'll see if I can find it. I hit it on Facebook. I saw it.
Ah, I'm not on Facebook, so
Yeah, and I'll pull it over to email.
that would be great.
Stan, I have you for the 12th of July.
Okay. All right. Well, if you want to search Amanda Ripley, it's going to be one of those big thinks when they're sitting in front of that white screen thing. It's a big think, and it's Amanda Ripley, and she's talking about media and the default in media is to keep you under stress and pressure. and so forth to maximize profits, kind of thing. I don't know if I'm going to use what I'm going to use for the catch line. Probably the future of media or something like that. But it's that's going to be the talk that I use.
They're doing a good job on that now, Stan.
Well, I can't. I've noticed that even in the taglines for, and I'm a YouTube user, but even in the what they call bait clip, the clip bait, this will shock you. It is kind of the tail phrase on almost anything that you see now. And there's something I saw. I'll post this too. John Oliver. I don't know if you're following John Oliver. Did a very good, I think maybe a half-hour presentation on AI slop. And what is AI slop? Well, there is a huge quantity of AI pictures being used that are basically misinforming, or just just giving you the wrong information, or making faking you, making you think that something's being done that's true, that it's not true. And it has the problem of what they call a liar's dividend, in that it makes it easier for you to think that something that's real isn't real. That's and I'll find that video and I'll post that too, because that's very interesting, I think.
Well, you might even want to make it part of your future of media presentation. Because it sounds like we're going that way.
Stan, you're muted.
Yeah, I mute myself when I go to look for a video because I don't want to have it bleed into the conversation. Thanks you for saying that. Um, it would work with that. I'll put it in with that as well as a backup, or at least reference it. But I had something I was going to say, but I forgot what it was. But let me find this and then I'll post it.
Okay. And
One of the things I ran across this week is the idea of having a green brake light mounted on the front of your car, so that you can tell if the person coming towards you is intentionally slowing down, or if it just looks like they're slowing down, or whatever, making it safer to cross a street in front of an oncoming vehicle. This is somewhere in Europe, they're trying this on some kind of an experimental basis, and it supposedly reduces car nose and pedestrian and car collisions by 18%. But it's going to be very difficult to do it here because there are any number of state and federal laws that say you can only have white and amber lights in the front of the car. This, to a certain extent, makes sense, but
It's 10 o'clock.
yep. Well, the future of hydrogen. I embarked on this because I am constantly being deluged by people asking me, we're going to change to an all hydrogen economy and this is going to save the world, kind of thing, which is kind of easy to either ignore or just say, no, it doesn't work that way. And then they go away angry. But I eventually became curious, what is all this fuss about hydrogen? Well, it turns out that the fuss about hydrogen is that when you burn it, what you get is water. It's not pollution. Okay, but how do you put hydrogen into the car engine to burn it? I mean, monatomic hydrogen is not a friendly thing. Even diatomic hydrogen is not an especially friendly thing.
It's
It
called
wants
hydrogen embrittlement.
it's and so I looked into it a little bit more, and I think most of us are, what can I say this, engineers or at least tech savvy. And we understand that what we want and what you can do in the world are two different things, and there's kind of a interesting middle ground where maybe we can do it and maybe we can't, and if we do it, maybe we shouldn't. So I went off and discovered more about this than I wanted to, and found a bunch of other things that are actually were actually much more interesting. But to deliver the thing, there are futures for hydrogen. They're not going to be what most people want. Along the way, I discovered that there are, depending on who counts, 8 or 10 colors of hydrogen. And what everybody wants is green hydrogen. And actually, when you look closely, you discover that there is no such thing. To use hydrogen as a fuel, you have to collect it somehow. And there are various ways you can make your pot of hydrogen. But all of them require expending energy. And actually, for almost all of them, you end up expending more energy putting hydrogen in a can than you can ever get out of it. Physics is so nasty to us sometimes. It does not believe in our wants. But it's an interesting rat hole that has a lot of different things. What can you say? I thought I was going to be able to give one speech, and it's turned into I have to give a speech that says, no, we can't do that, which is not at all fun. Anyway, the first video on the list is a kind of an overview of the future of hydrogen. That's about the best case you can make for hydrogen. Tom?
This thing about energy loss is a total red herring. There's energy loss in everything.
Yep.
Second, the law of thermodynamics. There's
Okay.
less energy loss in hydrogen than there is in fossil fuels, for example.
This is also true.
So hydrogen would be a great fuel compared to what we have now. The only thing that's better is direct solar energy. So if we can produce, perform electrolysis or whatever method we're going to use to get free hydrogen, if we can do it using other sources such as solar, hydrogen has a place, I think, especially in something like transportation, where it's hard to be connected to the electrical grid when you're driving, for example. So just recently, I've been seeing a lot coming from Toyota about their new hydrogen engine, and also even Cummins, who's well known for producing diesel engines. They now have a hydrogen engine. So I think there's something there that needs to be explored. I'm not sure how they're getting their hydrogen. I think the Toyota engine actually kind of produces its own hydrogen somehow from water through an electrolysis process. I'm not sure where the energy for that comes from. So that needs more exploration.
It's one of these things where it looks really, really good. And then
The advantage of hydrogen
work quite that well.
Yeah, the
because
advantage of hydrogen over electrical engines is that the hydrogen has high energy density, so it's easy to refuel very quickly.
Yes.
And have longer range than with batteries.
Yes. But you have to deal with the tank you're going to put the hydrogen in.
Yeah. You have to deal with those tanks too,
But a gas tank is much different than a hydrogen tank. Especially if you want to condense it down and have it be liquid hydrogen. Then you're carrying around a tank that you have to keep at minus 254 Fahrenheit. Unless you want your fuel to expand and blow your tank to smithereens. Anyway, some of these other people are going to talk more about these things.
Okay.
The next video.
We do have further hands up. I don't know if you
want. Oh, I'm sorry.
Tons of hands.
People, all of a sudden there are lots of hands.
Yeah.
Hi, Stan.
Just a quick question. They were comparing the density of hydrogen as being better than the density of a battery, and they had that visual of a B-roll of the truck or the bus.
The energy density.
What is it in comparison to your standard gas tank? Is it it's not as good as that, is it?
No, it's better. Hydrogen has more energy density than fossil fuels.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's better than gasoline?
Yes.
Yeah. Per volume, yeah.
Per volume as a liquid.
But you don't have to have that super cold tank to you can use standard. I mean, I think I saw a video some time ago when we did hydrogen that they thought that the better way to transport hydrogen was as ammonia.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it gets a better aren't hydrogen containers kind of leaky? Isn't that a kind of an issue with it's kind of a slippery substance to contain?
Yep.
Well, yeah, yes. And it's also hard to make a hydrogen-proof wall. It's not just around the edges.
Right.
It wants to, it will just take and seep right through your whatever.
Okay, what I'm trying to understand here is that you're talking about the energy density of hydrogen is better than batteries and gasoline, but do you need to have a super cold 200 degree below zero container to make that in your car to make that possible, or is it done with a more reasonable PSI container?
It depends on the mechanisms you use. We'll talk more about that in a couple of films.
Because I think I've seen Toyota's hydrogen container connection, and it looked like a pretty high-tech device that you had to slide down in there to get that
Yep.
to transfer.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Toyota's been running that for, I know, over 20 years.
They're still working on it. Doug?
There. Oh, David, you're first.
Oh,
Um, I'll just wait till later.
Okay.
Just a couple of things I wanted to share is, and I think I shared this meetings back, but the Prairie Island nuclear plant is producing hydrogen on the side with the excess heat that's created with the reaction. So that's one thing going on. The other thing is that the U of M Morris is way out there in front of everybody for years, working with hydrogen. They're using wind turbines to produce it, and like I think Stan said, what they're doing. They've run the vehicles out there. They've got tractors and cars and everything on hydrogen, but then, like Stan said, the ammonia is now the way that they're moving, and the thing that they're talking about is there's real easy storage for ammonia because of all the use in agriculture. And so there's all kinds of ways for people to use it. So it from what I've learned over the last 20 years, it's a very strong fuel. I know as I was retiring, I had a meeting with the top people from Ford, General Motors, and Toyota. And at that time, their top engineers all felt, and that's a little over 20 years ago, all felt that hydrogen was the future. And at that point, I personally was saying, no, I believe it's electric. And so far it's kind of proved out that way. But the hydrogen's coming on strong, and I suppose Tom will get to this, but there's literally hundreds of buses running in China right now on hydrogen. So it's definitely being used.
Yeah,
Anyway.
It works. My skepticism is that people are overgeneralizing specific success stories and projecting them past the bend in the curve. What you can do in a farm tractor or an over-the-road diesel hauler is different than what you can do in a family car. It just is. And it's about the laws of physics, not about the laws passed by the government and how to make these vehicles. Carol.
Yeah, can we get a little bit of chemistry in here to
No.
help unconfuse me? Ammonia, I believe, is NH4OH.
NH3.
NH3.
NH
Methane is CH4, ammonia is NH3.
NH3OH?
No, NH3. Simple.
Liquid ammonia.
Yeah. One nitrogen, 3 hydrogens.
Okay. Still, how do you crack this to get your hydrogen, and what's the cost or the methodology in that? You can't just say, well, we're transporting it as ammonia.
Usually electrolysis.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
And ammonia is transported all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what do you have to do to the ammonia to get your hydrogen, and how cost effective is that in the equation?
there's two ways. One, it is flammable. And the other is it works in a fuel cell to produce electricity.
Well, that's not what she asked. She asked, how do you get free hydrogen?
Oh,
Out of ammonia.
you don't get free hydrogen out of ammonia.
No.
You don't want free hydrogen out of ammonia. You want the electric potential in a fuel cell that drives the electric motor. Okay?
Okay, so the ammonia is part of your fuel cell.
The ammonia goes through a fuel cell and gives you water when you put oxygen into the fuel cell with it, and nitrogen, supposedly.
Okay.
At a room temperature, at a low temperature, not a room temperature, it does create some heat loss. It isn't usable.
Okay, that actually makes sense to me, and I'm understanding it better.
The question is the cost of the ammonia to put it in versus the cost of batteries or the cost of gasoline. And we keep forgetting that gasoline is a produced product. It just took solar energy and millions of years to produce it. They don't count that.
Well, then you have to
also-
fractionate what comes off the oil well.
Oil, yeah,
You know, gasoline does not come off the oil well.
exactly.
Yeah.
You have to separate it out or produce it.
Yeah, that takes a lot of energy itself.
And during World War II, Germany produced gasoline from coal. It just was much more expensive than running it through a fractionator. So again, all of this comes back to what are the comparative costs? And Tom, Europe has been using a lot more diesel cars than the United States have. It's a difference in engineering trade-offs. What are you trying to accomplish, and how are you trying to get there? So the question is, what are going to be the comparative costs and the comparative efficiency of using hydrogen in some form? If you use gaseous hydrogen, you don't have to have that real low temperature, but you don't get nearly the density in a tank of hydrogen that's gas that you do in a tank of hydrogen that's liquid. So you've got some costs and thermodynamic losses there. And it's the same with LNG. If you liquefy natural gas, and it only takes, what, minus 70 degrees Fahrenheit or something like that, instead of minus 200 degrees Fahrenheit to liquefy natural gas. But if you want to transport natural gas across an ocean, you liquefy it
Chemical
and put it in a
formula
tanker.
for ammonia.
So it's going to be a question of cost, comparative cost.
Yeah, this is a problem. This is a classic engineering problem. You go in and there are 19 roads out, and which is the most profitable? And as you start down each of them, you discover, oh, this is not as cheap as I thought it was. And so you back up and you try a different road, and you back up and you try a different road. And eventually you discover there ain't nothing free.
We also need to put a price on clean air.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, the problem with calculating profits is that does not include all the costs.
Yeah, it doesn't. And I don't know that I'm especially happy with the idea of people driving around up and down the streets with tanks full of liquid hydrogen. By the time you make a tank that is strong enough to hold liquid hydrogen and keep it safely, you've made a tank that's probably rather heavy. And then you have to make it strong enough to survive 120-mile-an-hour automobile collision. And at this point, you say, okay, we won't be using liquid hydrogen. Something you can drive on the test track is not something you want to take out and play in traffic with.
Well, do you want to play in traffic with a tank full of flammable gasoline?
Yeah.
Compared to a tank of hydrogen?
Hydrogen's not that flammable, really.
Well, that's true. But the other car will be flammable, and the heat will, you'll have an exploding tank of liquid hydrogen, which won't be liquid anymore.
No, it won't be
in a
liquid.
very large hurry.
And it's very light, so it rises.
Yeah. Anyway, some of these people, we're not going to get to the. There are people who've done some analysis of all this with lots of numbers and blackboards and stuff, but we'll probably not even get to those. The next video is longer, and he talks about unlocking the. I don't think he calls it a miracle. The benefits of the hydrogen economy. That's a good overview of the good and the bad of what's coming. Carol.
Yeah, more chemistry questions. I take it that when these people are talking about hydrogen, they mean the hydrogen molecule. Two hydrogen atoms that are bonded. They don't mean the hydrogen atom, single H. Is that correct?
Yeah. Monatomic hydrogen is not your friend.
No, I realize that, but I wanted to make sure that when these people are talking hydrogen and they got that little 2 down there,
Yeah.
it means the hydrogen molecule.
Yeah.
2 hydrogen atoms.
Yep. Linked together. Yep.
Okay.
My question is, I heard that, I don't want to complain, but that computer generated voice drives me crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And so does that not nonsensical, too loud music in the background is also driving me crazy.
I agree.
It was but it's just like they threw a word process document into a machine and it came up with a video. But other than that, they talked about compressed gas versus compressed hydrogen versus liquefied hydrogen. This is my question: is the liquefied the I mean, is the compressed hydrogen still more dense than gasoline and electronic battery? Or do you have to liquefy it in order to make that more dense?
No,
And what is it? What is how much? If you were to say, what is the numbers of like if you could get so many miles per X with liquefied versus compressed? What is it? How big of a difference is that?
oh, there isn't any necessary comparison because you can make a comparison, I suppose. It's complicated because storing liquid H2 is a very different problem than storing compressed H2.
Because it's a refrigeration issue.
Yeah. You got the liquid hydrogen tank is gonna be minus 253, I believe, inside.
That Fahrenheit, I assume.
Yeah. And that's hard. It's not so much that it's hard to do, it's hard to keep because the tank, to cool the tank is not going to like the temperature gradient from the inside to the outside. And so I'm not a refrigeration engineer.
Okay. Well, then compressing it, can you achieve the same density and compression, but it's just going to be hot?
No.
Okay.
Liquid is much more, it's a liquid, not a gas.
What kind of pressure are we talking about? PSI for if your average consumer compressed hydrogen vehicle, is it for 45,000 PSI or?
I I do not know. Some of the later videos are going to talk about that, I'm sure.
I'm not sure that anybody is trying to do that. I don't think I've heard of a gaseous transport for a car.
You
If you were
compress
going to run a Hindenburg type vehicle, you might consider compressed gas for that.
if you compress hydrogen enough, it becomes a liquid just because of the compression.
Yeah.
But at present, hydrogen is still so expensive.
Now, I just looked it up. It says, according to Gemini, compressed hydrogen for applications like fuel cell vehicles is typically stored at 5,000 PSI or 350 bar, or 10,000 PSI at 700 bar. So I don't know if that's a trustable answer, but I'm assuming that once you get it, if you're doing the compression, it gets kind of hot. But after you get it, if you achieve the 300 or 5,000 or whatever, you get it there, and then it sort of cools off, and it becomes room temperature for as far as the tank itself is concerned.
Yeah,
But
you have to take the heat away. Big fan, radiating fins, and the pressure will come down a little bit.
No, No,
The
the
temp-
temperature.
The temperature will
down.
come down. Pressure will not.
Yes.
The next video is actually about a company that's trying to do this. Toyota is making hydrogen fueled combustion engines. Well, they're making them one at a time and learning and then making another one.
Save the
What's a synthetic fuel?
That's, I believe, the next video. I've been approached to invest in this, and I just turned it down because of the person who was making the recommendation. But when I heard it come up again, oh, and it actually was interesting. Not the solution, but it's interesting. And after that,
Synthetic
the-
fuel is basically what I was talking about when I said the Germans were making fuel out of coal.
Yeah.
It's expensive, but it certainly can be done.
the synthetic fuel thing is actually interesting. But is everything sold by scammers? I suppose it is. Yes, David?
Well, is everything sold by a corporation a scam? No, not
No,
necessarily.
not necessarily.
The question are cost benefits and engineering trade-off. What can we say?
No. Anyway, synthetic fuels are interesting.
I've got your synthetic fuel video basically ready to go. If you want to, unless you want to switch the order.
No, let's just do that one.
It's 14 minutes.
Yeah. It's the same guy. I think he does a good job in doing these presentations.
When I first heard his voice, I thought it was Jason. For a second there, I thought that sounds like Jason.
Not Jason.
No, it's not Jason. I have an ex-student who he reminds me of very much. But anyway, here we go. I'm gonna let it go right now. Hold on, I gotta get the share going.
His channel is fascinating.
I've seen him before. He's really good. I like him.
Then what were the next two? I don't remember what the next two were, unfortunately.
Well, I've got the list here, but the next two videos that you've got in here,
I didn't put. I've got the list too.
you don't have
I didn't put a comment on them.
you have one that says there were many 5 or 10 minute things on corners.
Yeah. The corners. If you saw this there was this little feature of it, and you could go there, and you this little feature of it, you go there. But that was the basics of it. The if we go down below that remark, there's one that says hydrogen car failure is why Toyota is saying this is not working.
You want that next? You want me to do that next?
Why don't we do that one next?
It's 16 minutes and 30.
E.
We got time.
Okay.
Tom?
Yo. You've muted yourself, David.
Oh, shoot.
Or you will not.
No, I think I unmuted myself. It's really tough to predict the future, and it's even more tough if you're trying to predict future innovations and price changes.
Oh, yeah.
Did you find anything at all that suggested that the efficiencies of performing some of these might come down in cost enough to make synthetic fuels or hydrogen more attractive in the next 10, 15 years? Enough that they're likely to be able to overcome some of these challenges?
No.
Okay.
There were lots of people who are very hopeful, but their numbers
are still not
didn't seem to quite be attached to this planet.
right. And that's the interesting thing about natural gas too, is you can have synthetic natural gas and comparable to synthetic gasoline, where you take the carbon dioxide out of the air and you use
ammonia,
sustainable, you use renewable electricity to synthesize methane out of carbon dioxide and hydrogen. That would close the gap.
Closes the loop.
Close the loop, yes. And if that could be done at a reasonable cost.
And that's the kicker.
That's the kicker, yes. But
you can do it in the lab.
We absolutely can do it in the lab. We know how to do it. We know how much it's going to cost. It's either a question of making the fossil fuels more expensive so that it's reasonable to do it, to pay all the real costs in terms of pollution and healthcare, or you have to make the cost cheaper to do it.
Yeah. In some ways, the solution to some of this is to drive the cost of fossil fuels way up.
Yeah, exactly.
But the social disruptions from that
are significant.
How do you grow food? How do you harvest it? How do you move it to the factory to make cornflakes? How do you make the cornflakes?
And that's just food. That's not the rest of the society.
Yeah. And driving the cost of fuel up is going to stomp on every step of that process. And there were times doing this that I really just wanted to put it down and walk away and say we're doomed.
That's another problem with future studies, is that temptation comes up a lot, especially in the United States these days.
Yeah. The down towards the middle of the list, there are two things I linked to. The Koenigsegg 600 horsepower, and then the one below that about the transmission. This is a very exotic automobile. Around $2 million a shot.
I saw that. Yeah.
And
I watched that video.
it's a fascinating reimagination of the automobile drivetrain.
Yeah.
And you look at it, this is so obvious. Why didn't anybody think to do this? And you look at the transmission, you say, you don't need to, you could do that with a 4-speed transmission, and it would be so much simpler and cheaper and have fewer problems. But I'm sure it'd be a fun car to drive. But
I think it's a 3-cylinder, isn't it?
yeah, one of them is a 3-cylinder, and they also have one that's a V8.
Okay.
In that's yeah, the 3-cylinder is, he didn't say that in so many words, but it felt like the 3-cylinder was basically a generator to charge the batteries.
Like a train.
Yeah. But the way the transmissions, or are those transaxles, or whee just
Well,
I mean a clutch that you can't miss a shift. Of course, it does have 9 clutches or 7 clutches. But it's a half of the weight of a normal transmission, and I understand the price tag. There's an awful lot of very precise machining, but it's I can't afford a $2 million car.
okay, I'm gonna run this video now.
Okay.
There was a time when
Anyway, that's the future of hydrogen. It's not the miracle rescue that I was hoping to find. But I feel better because I know there are lots of other people who think it is. I was not super gullible.
Now, when this gets up to, when I put this up on the YouTube, I'll be putting all of his videos in the description. But you've already submitted this to the app, didn't you? Do the Meetup app, Tom?
Not really.
Okay.
So somebody added them to the. I had when I started as an experiment, I asked Google's AI about the future of hydrogen, and I put that up for. Oh, that was up there. Been up there for 2 or 3 weeks, I suppose. But I see that someone, you or Tom or Dave, added this list of videos to the bottom of that Google AI thing. So thank you.
I just want to say that I got to go because I have a concert to play at 1 o'clock. But I'm speaking next week, and it also will be about. It's kind of a continuation of what I did 2 months ago, comparing a couple different kinds of energy sources for electrical power, and I'll be comparing a couple different kinds of energy sources for that in this coming month. So that's what
Yay.
it's about. So I got to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
Mhm.
Good presentation. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Yes, I appreciated it.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I think we've kind of gone over this material before, but it's sort of, it keeps coming back for some reason. And I always,
Yeah.
I think that the oil companies prefer this hydrogen solution because it gives them a little bit more duration it keeps them more
Yeah.
hopeful.
Yeah.
If they could find a way they could pump electricity into a car. Oh, the local gas station down the street has 4 charging stations now. I'm not sure how they make money off of it, but I suppose they charge for however many kilowatts you put in your battery.
Yeah.
And
Now, isn't the hydrogen that you get off nuclear power called pink, Doug? Pink hydrogen?
I don't remember.
The one that NSP or XL is, that's considered they were talking green, but I don't know if that's true, because the energy source, it's, nuclear is clean, so I guess it could be green.
Yeah,
No,
there are a couple of different, depending on who you look at, there are 8 or 6 or 9 colors of hydrogen.
Yeah.
and one of them is pink, I think, and I think that's a nuclear resource.
Is it? Okay.
I don't know.
There was a hydrogen hub scheduled for our area, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen now.
Yes, Carol.
Have you seen any research or anything about the notion of stabilizing monatomic hydrogen to use as an energy source?
How would you stabilize it?
I don't know, but this is
Magic?
something that the sci-fi people have been talking about
Oh yeah,
for
they've talked about it for decades. But
so, is there a way, is anybody looking at that?
Yes and no. Yes, there is a way. If you think of hydrogen as a plasma, it is probably monatomic. Is anyone looking at that? Probably not.
Okay, so you're talking about the mechanism the sun uses to put out energy with.
Exactly. You can maintain monatomic hydrogen at plasma temperatures.
Okay.
But in terms of using that in a practical,
how are you going to contain it?
There are some engineering trade-offs there.
Gotta go. Thanks, Tom. Again.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's
a 93,000-mile safety factor, again, seems like a good idea.
Yeah.
You like that, huh?
I like that.
Let me see. Who was talking about the the Chinese coming up with their, somebody was going to post an article to chat about the Chinese solar power from space initiative. Was that you, Stan?
No, somebody else. I was talking about using a new scale, and I submitted that. It's for you. It's at the very top, but it's not. There's no title against it. It was about using um, the thorium reactor, small reactors.
Ah, okay. Can
Yeah,
Copenhagen atomics make thorium reactors work?
yeah. There was this news story I went across a couple of days ago that someone has a Copenhagen.
Yeah, it's,
Someone may have a prototype thorium reactor.
yeah, it's Copenhagen. Here's-
Yeah, okay, he's posted that article in chat, which I can copy. And thank you for that.
Copenhagen Atomics.
Yes.
Um,
We have a date, July 19th, that's open. Do we want to talk some more about weapons of war? Or does anybody have any other good suggestions? Do we try a potpourri again and encourage a bunch of little discussions? And then we're hoping to meet again at the library on the 26th of July in person.
But it is going to be hybrid. You can,
Oh yeah, you can
Yeah.
you
come,
will be able to dial in.
you can come by Zoom.
Yes, because right about then, I plan to be high at home, recovering from my knee replacement.
Other knee surgery.
ooh,
Right. So I'm not going anywhere.
well, I'm
Thank you
sorry
all.
to be. I'm sorry to have been such a bearer of bad news. I really hoped that hydrogen was going to save us, but no.
Well, they're talking about improving the electrolysis efficiency from 75% up to the 95% range, which might help a little, but again, won't solve the problem.
Well, but it's not really that hydrogen is not going to save us, as that we have switched from hydrogen to direct electric cars as the savior.
Well, but that's just one little piece of how we use energy.
Of how what?
How we use energy.
Yes, this is true.
Um, if we can, well, there's also the question of if you use energy more efficiently, you probably will use a lot more of it because the cost comes down.
Because what?
The cost comes down.
Well, and we also have the the fact that this AI revolution we're looking at is monstrously energy intensive.
Which sort of implies that the cost would be more expensive, doesn't it?
Well, it's that we are going to be using more of it regardless of how much it costs. I mean, we've got people who are building power plants just to serve their giant AI farm.
Right.
Yep.
But if,
Or people who are keeping coal-fired power plants that were slated for destruction, again, to fuel their enormous AI power farm.
Yeah.
well, except that if in fact we were to enforce our Clean Air Act,
Ah,
We used to have one. I mean, remember, we're not supposed to talk about politics, but I believe that the Clean Air Act has been gotten rid of.
no,
no.
not quite yet, but we're headed that, we seem to be headed that direction.
I think the entire EPA is on the skids, is it not?
Probably.
Yeah. The changes in the computer, what you can do with a computer has just been astonishing.
Did you hear about the application where they took four cell phones and wired them together to do numerical analysis for something like $10 a, they used old cell phones at $10 a piece and wired four of them together to do numerical analysis.
Oh, I can, when I started,
They're better, they would perform better than what's the little processor that,
Raspberry Pi,
yeah, Raspberry Pi. Better performance specifications than a Raspberry Pi.
I've been in the computer industry since the ENIAC. Michigan State had an ENIAC in the basement of the football stadium. It didn't work. You could power it up and get the vacuum tubes all hot, but it wouldn't do anything. We used to raid its spare parts bin to keep our radio stations on the air. The only computer that I ever really designed was it wasn't really a computer, it was an arithmetic logic unit that you could program into a 4,000 gate array, which was at that time about the size of a deck of playing cards. It was 4,000 gate CPU, and it was like I said, about the size of the deck of playing cards. And the Raspberry Pi is smaller than that. And you look at the difference in computability. I mean, the Pi's I/O processor had more oomph than that thing, and that was over 30 years. And now it's the processing capacities of the modern cell phone were unimaginable in the 60s. Just you would read science fiction, people writing science fiction novels, and they talk about stuff that were not then as good as what cell phones are now. And these people are dreaming about this.
Yeah.
And what's and then this the networking of supercomputers into mega computers is just, I mean, I worked on a controlled data 3600 for 5 years, and that was, at that time, or when it started, was the fastest computer in the world. And it was just absolutely incredible what it could do. And my phone could totally wax it. I mean, anything. The only thing the 3600 had, our 3600 had an 80-bit hardware random number generator. That was used for various scientific calculations about nuclear physics. And when I was first introduced to using this, I just looked at Dr. Shrink and said, what? Okay, real random numbers, I can see that. But how are you going to make a duplicate run? And he said, this is one of the reasons I hired you. He says the thing is actually, he says, and I just kept staring at him. He said, well, he says there's a trick to it. Oh, he says, you don't use the radioactive numbers, you record them, and then you use the recording so you can repeat it.
Right.
But it was just, I mean, it was a thing the size of an office desk that actually it was two 48-bit words that it would fill randomly, but there's 80 bits of random data in it. And what they're doing now, I used Cray for about 3 months, and it was just, I don't believe this. And now, I mean, I'm sorry, Cray, that was a Cray 1. It wasn't called that then, it was just called the Cray. And what they're doing now is just,
Of course, the Cray had a really big problem in that it was not set up to even do arithmetic in the hardware. It had to do all of its numerical stuff by masking and shifting a word. And
that was a feature
in itself got rid of a lot of the extra programming power that you were getting out of the Cray, because it was such inefficient, sloppy.
It was, well, you could argue that it was inefficient and sloppy, but it was faster than doing the full words processes. That's why it didn't have a divide function.
That's why what?
That's why it didn't do divides.
Okay.
No, really. Cray 1 divide was reciprocal.
Subtract.
No, there was reciprocal and multiply.
Oh. All right.
But it didn't have an actual divide because you could hardwire a reciprocal, but you couldn't hardwire a divide. Um, the But what they're doing now, some of the stuff is just I'm
There was a time in ancient history when I was looking at going to work for Cray. And so I did a bunch of checking up on, how the machines actually worked and what they did. And I decided that it really wasn't the future of computing.
well, the speed of light is a bitch.
Say again?
The speed of light is a bitch.
Well, yes. Have you ever seen, there are various videos out there of Grace Hopper speaking about computers.
Fine lady. Worked with her one day.
You actually worked with her?
Yes.
Oh, well, have you ever seen her talk where she, holds up a piece of wire and says, that's a microsecond, and he holds up a,
I gotta
wire, and that's
I get to tell my story, my Grace Hopper story.
okay. Tell.
Dr. Hopper came to Michigan State University spring of 60, must have been 67. I was a junior in the computer science program, and I was the chief engineer of the student radio station. And through one of these connections or the other, or both, she was coming to speak to some kind of a conference where there 1,000 people are going to take over Fairchild Theater. And I was tasked to go over to a classroom and help with something, and I could get an extra credit point for my math class. Why math? Anyway, so I go over there. There's 3 graduate students and me, and there's this perky little thing about the age of my mother. Introduced to this gentleman. We are going to make nanoseconds. Each other. He says, first, there's a test. Okay. She had 4 big spools of cable on a cart. Measure the cables, figure out the impedance, and calculate how long a piece of cable is that will be a nanosecond. So we start figuring all this out, measuring them. And I said, much easier. I just went over to the station and got the table and looked it up. No, we're going to do it here. Okay. We figured out we had 3 different kinds of cables. We ended up with 3 different answers. And she says, okay, now you just take and cut off pieces of cable that long. And to within probably, she had some little jigs she brought with her in a briefcase. Straighten the cable out and put it there. Put it back. We made 700 and some of them. and she took us to lunch. And I went off to do my show on the radio, but the best thing of it was is we were getting packed up and taking things over to the theater. She says, she says, "Is your mother Helen Woodbury?" Yes, ma'am. She says, "I served with her in the Navy."
That was about the time when Grace Hopper was,
Not an admiral yet. She was a commodore, I think.
yeah, but she was neck and neck fighting it out with Admiral Rickover for the oldest human being on active duty in the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Admiral Rickover won.
Yeah, he did, but not by much.
Uh-huh.
I think they retired in the same year. I know there were people who said that he was the only thing he was waiting for was for her to retire.
Yep.
But they yeah. That's my Grace Hopper story, and I'm sticking to it.
I heard a story about Rickover. Did he not get into workman's clothing and walk around during the electric boat plant?
Yep.
To ensure that everything was being done according to spec?
Yep. There are pictures of him dressed like a shop foreman walking around.
And I think that his rationale was that he wanted to ensure that the gentlemen, that the people living in this quarters were going to be safe. Now, what is it? I may have a question about this.
The submarines?
Yeah, the nuclear subs. Since we've proven small modular reactors in the Navy, both for submarines and for carriers, I think doesn't that demonstrate that small modular reactors are possible?
Oh, there's no question they're possible. The question is how much they cost.
And they also, if you have it contained inside the military, you can control the non-proliferation of the fuel.
In theory,
To a certain extent.
it depends on which military you're talking. In the Russian military, I'm not so sure.
Well,
there are stories about some lost nukes that there are questions of how they were lost and were they lost sufficiently deep that they can't be accessed.
And if you go back far enough, you'll find out that the US talked Ukraine into giving up their nuclear arsenal with the "we will protect you from now till infinity."
Mm-hmm.
Promises.
Yeah.
More or less kept.
Well, this was right about at the time that the Soviet Union was breaking up.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the peripheral countries that had been part of the Soviet Union had a lot of this gear. And we did not want them to have this gear. Even though they were no longer part of the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something they're regretting now.
Yeah. Well, it's something almost all of our allies are considering now.
Yes. But I think the
Wait.
Ukrainians more so than most.
Thanks, Tom.
Yep. See you next week, God willing.
But good Lord willing and the creek don't rise.
Yep.
Mm,
Okay, so the next week is going to be Tom Walsh.
yes.
All right, I'm going to shut off the meeting, Carol. I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.